You know, some athletes, their whole story is about stats and trophies. But every once in a while, someone comes along who just completely changes how you see their sport. They turn it into, well, into art. That was Seve Ballesteros. We're going to dive into the story of a golfer whose genius was just as wild and beautiful as the Spanish coast he came from. And no, that's not just some cool marketing line. It's the literal truth. I mean, think about it. While all the other future pros were at fancy country clubs with perfect grass, Seve's journey started right there, on the sand. This one little fact, it's the key to understanding everything that made the man a legend. So yeah, let's start right there, on that beach. Because this is where it all begins. This is how his totally unique childhood created one of the most imaginative, most creative players the game has ever seen. So picture this, a small fishing village in Spain. No pristine fairways, no manicured greens. Seve's training ground was the sand, the wind, the bumpy, unpredictable shoreline. And for years, get this, he had just one club, a 3-iron. That's it. Can you imagine learning every single shot in golf, from tiny little chips to full-on drives with one of the hardest clubs to hit? But here's the crazy part. That wasn't a disadvantage. It was his superpower. It forced him to invent shots, to be creative in a way that no coach or lesson could ever teach. Okay, so when you've got a foundation like that, it's really only a matter of time before the whole world takes notice. What came next was one of the fastest, most electrifying arrivals in the history of sports. Just look at this timeline for a second. It's absolutely insane. He goes pro at 17. Just 5 years later, at only 22 years old, he wins the Open Championship, one of the biggest tournaments on the planet. And he was just getting warmed up. The very next year, he goes to Augusta, wins the Masters, and becomes the youngest guy to ever do it at that point. This wasn't just a rise to fame. This was a flat-out explosion. Look, winning is one thing, but how Seve won, that's what turned him into an icon. So now we're going to get into his peak years, when his incredible style mesmerized millions and truly earned him the nickname, the Artist. Let's just start with the raw number of wins. More than 90. Let that sink in. Over 90 professional victories all over the world. This wasn't some guy who got hot for a year or two. This was sustained, global dominance year in and year out. But as any real golf fan knows, there are wins and then there are wins. The true measure of greatness has always been the majors. And Seve, he grabbed 5 of them, putting his name right alongside the all-time greats. And here's the breakdown of those 5 massive wins. 3 Open Championships, the tournament where he first burst onto the scene, and 2 green jackets from the Masters. Every single one of those victories was a classic Seve performance, full of creative shots, bold risks, and an unbelievable knack for getting out of trouble. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? He was famous for hitting the ball absolutely everywhere except the fairway. He'd be in the trees, in a parking lot, behind a giant rock, and for any other golfer, it'd be a disaster. But for Seve, that's when the real show started. It was like watching a magician. Fans would literally show up hoping he'd hit a bad drive just so they could see what kind of miracle recovery shot he was going to pull off next. But Seve's impact was so much bigger than just his own trophy case. He was the guy who single-handedly sparked a massive power shift in one of golf's biggest events, the Ryder Cup. So for most of its history, the Ryder Cup was, well, kind of predictable. Team USA was a powerhouse. They just dominated year after year. Team Europe, they were always the underdog, and they rarely even came close. It just wasn't much of a fight. But then, Seve showed up. He didn't just bring his clubs, he brought his heart and soul. He was the fire. Seve completely transformed that European team. He injected this raw passion, this belief that they could actually go toe-to-toe with the Americans and win. And his celebrations, oh man, they were pure, uncut emotion. He became the symbol of this new era, inspiring his team and really an entire continent to some of their greatest victories ever. He was the heartbeat of that team. So when it's all said and done, how do we remember a guy who was so much more than just an athlete? In his final years, and even after he was gone, his real legacy became crystal clear. In 2008, Seve was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He had to face his toughest battle, and it wasn't on a golf course. And you know, he fought it with that same unbelievable spirit he showed his whole life. Through surgery after surgery, with a courage that inspired people way beyond the world of golf. And that's really the heart of it. Seve's legacy isn't just a list of trophies in a cabinet. It's the way he played the game. He showed everyone that golf didn't have to be quiet and reserved. It could be played with flair, with passion, with artistry. He brought an excitement to the sport that we've honestly rarely seen since. Which really just leaves us with this final thought. We all watch sports for the wins, for the competition. But Seve reminds us that it can be something more. His whole career basically asks this question. In the hands of a true genius, can pure, unfiltered passion elevate a game into something beautiful, into art? And in Seve's case, I think the answer is pretty obvious.